winners in the atomic bomb testing and everything else. And then we had all the Agent Orange from Vietnam. Then we kept going, and we kept going with all the immunization mess, the Project Chad stuff, which is, again, deliberate use of chemical and biological warfare munitions on civilians all over the United States and the military, and that continues as we speak. And then we get to DU. Let's talk about depleted uranium specifics. First off, the term depleted is a misnomer. There's nothing really depleted about it. Uranium munitions are actually the byproduct of the uranium enrichment process conducted by the U.S. Department of Energy. For every 100 pounds of pure uranium that goes in the enrichment process, 99.2 pounds is pure waste. Okay? And that's what we call uranium hexafluoride, which is then processed to form uranium munitions. Uranium munitions consist of kinetic energy penetrators or bullets, so we have the 5.56 millimeter, the 7.62 millimeter, and the 50 caliber. Those are rifle bullets. They're made out of the uranium. Then we have the 20 millimeter for the Navy phalanx, the 25 millimeter for the Army Bradley fighting vehicle and the Marine Corps lab, etc. The 30 millimeter for on the gunships and everything in the A-10. Then we get up to the tank rounds, 105 millimeter, 125 millimeter, and the primary 120 millimeter. Now, these are all gigantic slugs of uranium. And what they're actually made of is uranium hexafluoride was the primary product that went into it. But what we end up with is these isotopes, uranium-234, uranium-235, which is uranium-236, uranium-238, which is the predominant amount, probably 99% of it, plutonium, neptunium, and americium. So we have a toxic radiological compound that this stuff is made up of. So what we end up with is a whole host of uranium munitions. The kinetic energy penetrators, which are like bullets or giant rods of uranium. Think a gigantic dart. Everybody's played darts. That's what these look like. Except that the tank round is 10 pounds of uranium, and the 30 millimeter round that's fired by the A-10 is 3/4 of a pound of uranium, fired at 4,000 rounds a minute. That's 1.5 tons of uranium on target per minute. Incredible amount of volume of uranium radioactive materials. And then up and beyond that, we have the atom and the pedum. Now, the atom and the pedum, think about a giant softball. The outer casing of the softball is made of uranium, DU, and it's filled with high explosives. Incredibly effective against all personnel and animals and children and everything else. Totally used by the Israelis in Lebanon. Totally used by the Israelis in Gaza, by the U.S. in the Balkans, and again, Iraq and Afghanistan. See, one of the things that the people would like everybody to believe is this stuff doesn't do anything until it hits the target, and that's pure nonsense. It's shedding immediately, and that's what we've proven to watch the videos and photographs. You can go back and pull up the stuff that we did for CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. You can pull up the stuff on 60 Minutes, on Dateline, Nightline, the BBC, the Canadian Broadcasting. You can see it all there. You can pull up the videos and actually look at it yourself and find out how it works. So what we do know, the very earliest work that I know of, and the work that I used for when I was director of the Depleted Uranium Project for the U.S. Army, I used all the research reports when the United States gave Israel uranium munitions to use against the Egyptians during the Arab-Israeli War in 1973. And so our 1974 report, which confirmed all the health and environmental effects, was written as a consequence of giving Israel the use of uranium munitions to use in that Arab-Israeli War in 1973. Medical reports I've got for the UN troops and the other people that were on site totally confirmed. The medical problems are all there. The environmental problems, the on-site contamination that exists to this day out there in the Sinai is all confirmed. So that's where we had the earliest stuff. And then, again, we had an inventory, but we didn't really start to use it until Operation Desert Storm in 1990 and 1991. When these things are used, they create an extremely fine uranium dust, which is radiologically and chemically toxic. And now that creates air, water, soil, and food contamination. The Army's own documents say very clearly after this is used, it causes food and water contamination, makes food and water unusable for eternity. So we have all of that. So now what we're having is cross-contamination by ingestion. That's through eating and drinking. We have inhalation through breathing. We have absorption through the skin, and it goes right through the skin, just moves right in. And then obviously we have wound contamination through open wounds of the dust getting in there and the shrapnel. So we have all of this stuff. So we have all the direct medical effects. Now the U.S. Army orders, direct orders, require immediate radiobioassays. October of 1993. Colonel Peter Myers, Dr. Peter Myers, wrote it as we were getting ready to use uranium in Somalia in Africa in 93. And again, required a radio bioassay within 24 to 72 hours of exposure. Not days, weeks, months, or years later. Within 24 to 72 hours. And the reason for that is what we do know, and we wrote the medical directives, is that if you wait until after 30 days post-exposure, in other words, if you start, today, whatever today is, we waited 30 days to start the radio bioassay. The radio bioassay won't detect what your body actually got hit with, because what's mobile now in the urine is less than 1/1,000th of what actually was in the body. So in other words, they delay the testing, and therefore there's nothing there to be found, and therefore there was no exposure. This was a deliberate decision, deliberate act that was made many times, and then Dr. Bernard Rotzker and Dr. Michael Kilpatrick formalized it along with Colonel Bob Cherry, Colonel Eric Jackson, and Colonel Mark Melanson from the U.S. military. So we have all of these problems coming along. No two ways about it. Absolutely identified. There's probably been a dozen medical orders. And the other thing we need to know is when we require the medical care and medical orders for our own military by a Geneva Convention under God, we have to provide the same medical care to everybody we expose, which is millions upon millions of people. So the orders are there to do it. Now, the most recent orders were written by General Peake, who was a previous Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and General Eric Shinseki, who is the current Director of the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. So the two past secretaries of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and the last president are the officers that wrote the orders mandating medical care, immediate medical care for DU exposures. And it doesn't happen. And to me, that's unconscionable. And my continuous phone calls to them meet with silence.
When they come in wanting medical treatment, they're told, you're just mentally ill, here, take some Prozac.
That's exactly correct. They give them the Prozac and the psychotropic drugs, and they ignore the medical problems, even though they know exactly what the medical problems are. And then what next thing we know is we've got the suicides, and we got the family destruction, and we've got all the crime rates and everything else. And I'm tired of dealing with it. Now, once you use uranium munitions, the Army Regulation 700-48, Section 2-4 is very, very specific what must be done. Now, this Army regulation I wrote, but General Eric Shinseki, who is now Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, signed off on it as a commanding general, making it mandatory. So what we do know must be done wherever uranium munitions are used. Quote, as soon as exceptional risk permits, the Corps Joint Task Force Division Commander, Radiation Safety Officer will identify, segregate, isolate, secure, and label all radiologically contaminated equipment. Procedures to minimize the spread of radioactivity will be implemented as soon as possible. That's every place, okay? We have to bring explosives ordnance disposal use, the explosive experts in there. And during Desert Storm, EOD guys wouldn't go near it. I finally got 3 guys trained up for it, and they got killed at Camp Doha, and I still got their medals and, their certificate for medals in my briefcase. They were given posthumously, but didn't do a lot of good. The explosive ordnance disposal units will render all the equipment safe, because when this is used, we have incredible, not only radiological and chemical toxicities, but we have all the explosives hazards. So that has to be done. We continue on. Every mother, father, son, sister, daughter, brother, child of anybody in the military old enough to read needs to understand this. Quote, the unit team, individual responsible for equipment, whether friendly or foreign at that time or damaged, is responsible for taking all action consistent with this regulation and the Army pamphlet 700-48 that I also wrote. That's the down and dirty procedures. That's the cookbook of what you do. Quote, all equipment to include captured or combat radiologically contaminated equipment will be surveyed, packaged, retrograded, and decontaminated, and then released in accordance with the technical bulletin that you cited a moment ago, 1300-278, the pamphlet 700-48, and all the other relevant guidance that we put together. We contaminated not only Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the Balkans, Somalia, Afghanistan, but Vieques, Hawaii, Indiana, Florida, Nevada, California, Washington State. And the thing that bothers me the most, and I think, you've done history and everything, and I think everybody remembers this. On the 18th of April, hardly a man is left alive that doesn't remember what? Paul Revere's ride?
Yes.
Concord, Massachusetts, where our nation was born, is one of the most highly depleted uranium-contaminated cities in the world because of the Starmet plant. It is a national environmental disaster where the military is trying to clean it up. Albany, New York is also the same thing. Jonesboro, Tennessee is the same thing. I mean, these are totally contaminated areas because of uranium emissions with incredible medical problems. And we see the same thing in Hawaii. Schofield Barracks out there in Hawaii, pristine environment where the U.S. military did nuclear weapons testing with Davy Crockett's and DU munitions, totally illegal, and left the contamination. And now, as we speak, right now, I got an email not even a few minutes ago before we came on. It's a mess, and they're refusing to take care of it. Okay, so what we've got is use uranium munitions in testing and manufacturing and everything else. Then we have to use uranium munitions in combat operations, which has left wholesale contamination throughout. Now, when we use uranium munitions against either armor or any vehicles, we shoot it up. It just totally destroys it, totally contaminates it. The Army regulations, again, 700-48 and the Army Common Task Train require that you wear full protective equipment when you go near it. That's a gas mask with the HEPA filter, which is not going to do a whole lot of good, and then protective clothing, special clothing, so you don't get it out of your clothes. So you got all that contamination, everything that's crossed over.